Keep the ladies smiling. Know how to stop. These are just a couple of the family rules we learned from the Richmonds. When John and Linda visited Guatemala with their 3 beautiful children, we were asked to show them around the ministry in the city. Our kids quickly became fast friends, and we as adults bonded as well. We over the years, we've got to go camping together and do a number of things, and we love John and Linda. They become mentors and dear friends, and we are better people because of them. John Cotton Richmond's career has taken him to the front lines in the global battle against human trafficking. After being unanimously confirmed by the Senate, he served as the U.S. ambassador to monitor and combat trafficking in persons from 2018 to 21. Serving in the nation's highest-ranking position dedicated to human trafficking, he led U.S. foreign policy related to modern slavery and coordinated the U.S. government's response to the crime. Ambassador Richmond also served for a decade as a federal prosecutor in the U.S. Department of Justice Human Trafficking Prosecution Unit, where he prosecuted numerous victim-centered labor and sex trafficking cases. He also lived in India for 3 years, pioneering IJM, or International Justice Mission slavery work. But more important than these professional accolades is the husband and the father he is. John has challenged me to love my family better and those around me. His intentionality with his family has inspired Marlene and me to grow as parents and followers of Jesus. It is an honor to have him with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Ambassador John Cotton Richmond.
What a kind introduction, Chad. I wish my mom was here to listen to that. It's amazing. I'm so glad to be here tonight. I'm glad to be here as we talk about this story of hope together. But I want to start with some gratitude. First of all, thank you guys for being here on a Thursday night in the Advent season. There's a million things going on. I don't know what exactly brought you into this room tonight. It could be that you are a person with a huge passion for what World Orphans does. You're committed to their important work, and this is your marquee event of the season. So if that's you, fantastic. We're glad you're here. Warm up your checkbooks, stretch out your credit cards. You're going to have an opportunity. Or maybe you're here because a spouse, a friend, someone proverbially dragged you here against your will. You'd rather be home doing something else. Well, I hope you can at least enjoy the meal and pick up a couple book recommendations buried in my remarks. Some of you guys, actually, I saw you sneak in, are here for that sales conference that's happening in the other ballroom, and you just figured we had a better agenda. You know, no matter what, I want to be incredibly intentional about telling you how grateful I am that you all hosting this event has allowed me to escape Washington, D.C., where I live, for at least a day. So thank you so much. It is a terrible place to live. It's like a city full of senior class presidents. It's like everyone you didn't like in high school moved to the same city at the same time. We've been working with our kids on plural nouns, you know, like a flock of seagulls, a school of fish, a tower of giraffes, a wisdom of owls. Do you all know what they call a group of baboons? A congress. So I'm glad to be here in the snowy reality of Grand Rapids. You know, as Chad said, I have spent most of my career working with vulnerable and traumatized people all over the world. Certainly our time in India, living there for a little over 3 years with IJM was incredibly meaningful, but the Department of Justice, and then before I started the Libertas Council, where I currently work, it was a great honor to get to lead on U.S. foreign policy as an ambassador at large. I will tell you that my parents are still confused, like you were an ambassador, but like to where? So let me just explain it. Most of our ambassadors are ambassadors in residence. So an ambassador to one country, and then you represent the United States on any issue that might come up. And then we have 6 ambassadors at large. So not an ambassador to one location, but to everywhere, but only on one specific topic. And in the year 2000, I'm so grateful that Congress created the ambassador at large position to elevate human trafficking to that level. I have gotten to learn a few things, and I'd love to share 3 of them with you tonight. One is that the problem is massive, another is that we need each other, and the third is that there is a choice to make. So let me start with this idea that the problem is massive. There is no sugarcoating it. Most of the world does not enjoy the peace, prosperity, and freedom that we breathe in so naturally like it is air. Depending on how you count, there are right now between 53 and 110 armed conflicts going on around the globe. There are 43.7 million refugees currently seeking safety around the world, according to the United Nations. To put that in terms, there's about 10 million people in Michigan. So it's like 4.3 Michigans of people are refugees trying to find safety tonight. UNICEF, the UN's relief agency, estimates that there are 153 million orphans around the world. And right here in the United States, 437,000 kids in foster care. Meanwhile, the UN tells us that there's 27.6 million slaves in the world today, more than ever before in human history, more than were trafficked during all 400 years of the transatlantic slave trade. And there's a clear link between kids without families and human trafficking. The most common factor we see in sex trafficking victims domestically in the United States is that they spent some amount of time in the foster care system. They were kids without families. The head of Connecticut's child welfare system testified that 98% of the sex trafficking survivors in Connecticut came through the foster system. You know, I'm sure that percentage varies from state to state, but there's no doubt that kids without families is a breeding ground for trafficking. A trafficker I prosecuted in North Carolina explained to me that he would hang out near social services centers looking for 12 and 13-year-olds that were passing through, figuring that they'd been through multiple homes and he could recruit and groom them with a simple trip to the mall and a dinner. He was targeting them. A friend of mine was taken from her family in Africa as a child. She was given a new family, a new identity. She was brought right here to Michigan, where she was exploited throughout her childhood. And when the authorities finally separated her from her trafficker, she got dropped into the child protective system here. And she bounced through multiple homes until ultimately found herself in juvenile detention. And it was there that she heard that Jesus loved her. And she has turned her life around. She has a great job now. She's going to school. But she'd be the first to tell you that she lives life without a family. She lives life without a nuclear family. She lives life without an extended family. She scratches her head every year wondering, where do I go for Thanksgiving? And wonders, when I get pregnant and have a baby one day, I have no mother to call and talk to about that. 153 million orphans. That actually means that 2% of everybody alive on earth now is a kid without a family. That seems really, really high to me. And we know that when kids are growing up in homes that are not safe or without homes, they're at a disadvantage. Kids without family have lower educational success, lower earning capacity, lower life expectancy. And some will, of course, persevere and flourish. They will rise and strive and overcome, but their road is difficult. So I'm here to tell you that the problems of the world are real. They are massive. Violence is normative. Suffering is the status quo. If you're in search of evidence to support the doctrine of original sin or the total depravity of man, come travel with me. We will find it for you. And I know that some of you guys are out there thinking, Gosh, we didn't drive through the snow in Grand Rapids to come listen to some guy from DC tell us a whole bunch of overwhelming statistics about the world's problems. I get it. That's a fair point. I actually think people of goodwill want to draw close to folks who are experiencing pain if they think they can do something about it. But if the numbers just seem so large and there isn't a clear plan, if the problems seem inevitable, we wonder why. Why draw near? Well, I want to tell you the good news about this problem is that there is a clear plan, and the problems are not inevitable. The number of orphans in the world is not a naturally occurring phenomenon. It is not like a weather pattern that is outside of our control. We cannot stop earthquakes and hurricanes. When natural disasters happen, we are left with just sort of mitigating the adverse consequences. We bring tarps and bottled water and kerosene, but we can't do anything to stop them. But when it comes to helping kids find families, we're not limited to just mitigating the adverse consequences. We can move upstream and do something about it. And that's what World Orphans is doing. They're helping kids move from streets and gangs and institutions into families. And then they support those families with education and economic empowerment. The key to make this work, though, is that just like you have a nuclear family, you need an extended family. To do this work, we need a team. To do this work, we actually need each other. There's a great example of how this works. In the late 1700s, there was a group of people who linked arms in England to bring about the end of the slave trade. They had businessmen like Josiah Wedgwood, the famous entrepreneur that really figured out how to make china plates that would last. He used his business expertise. He became a patron of the cause. And then there were writers and entertainers like Hannah More, and they were influencers that used their platform to shake things up. They had some lawyers like Granville Sharp who used strategic litigation, took cases before the Lord Mansfield, critical judge at the time. They had a community organizer named Thomas Clarkson who would research and find information about the brutality of the slave trade and then go around England getting people to sign petitions. They had survivors of the slave trade like James Somerset and Equiano who would tell people their personal stories of what they experienced. They even had a cranky politician named William Wilberforce. And Wilberforce became the persistent widow of Parliament, constantly bringing up the issue for 30 years. They had John Newton, a former slave ship captain, who became a minister of the gospel and wrote the famous hymn, Amazing Grace, that we still sing today. This group of friends from different sectors and different generations conspired together with God to bring about the end of the slave trade in England. They needed each other. None of them could have done it alone. And after years of trials and efforts and setbacks and defeats, they were successful in 1807. Now, the best history of this is a book called Bury the Chains by Adam Hochschild, a secular historian who has a gift. He just makes history sing. But he has this one moment where he recognizes the faithfulness of this movement. And he said, if ever a moment the end of the slave trade became inevitable, it was when Thomas Clarkson got off his horse at Wade's Mill and prayed, recognizing that the beginning of the end started in prayer. Okay, so we have this massive problem. We need each other. I want to shift to the idea that we have a choice. And to do this, I want to remind you of a story you probably know about Edith Edgar. It's an amazing story. Edith was a gymnast in Hungary. She was so good at her gymnastics craft and ballet and dance and all the things she did, she made the Hungarian Olympic team for gymnastics. That is until they passed a law that said that Jewish kids can't be on the Olympic team. And she lost her spot. A few months later, her father, her two other sisters, and her mom were all taken to some brick kilns where they rounded up all the Jews, kept them there for a month before they moved her out to Auschwitz as a 16-year-old. And the day she arrived in Auschwitz was the day she became an orphan. Immediately, Dr. Mengele sent her mom to the gas chamber, and her dad was taken out, never to be seen again. In her memoir, The Choice, an account of not just surviving the death camp, but about living an entire life of trauma without a family, she talks about her big idea. Her big idea was that we all have agency no matter what we have suffered, no matter what we have endured, that we shouldn't compare our trauma to each other, but we all have a choice we get to make. We don't get to choose what happened. We get to choose what happens next. What are we going to do in our moment? Here is what she said. It was so beautiful. She said, "We can't choose to vanish the dark, but we can choose to kindle the light." To kindle the light requires us to deal honestly with the past and to rebuild community. And that's our goal tonight. For us to make a choice, to kindle the light, for us to choose to stand with World Orphans as they work to address this massive problem. And as you consider it, I want you to resist the idea that you could give a little bit and just at least we could help one kid. This sort of token-like effort, that's not how God sees it. God's economy is explosive. That's why he gives us the image of sowing and reaping. When you sow an acorn, you don't reap an acorn. You reap an oak tree that produces tons of acorns. We do not live in a karma economy where you get in what you get back what you put in. In fact, our entire faith is built on the idea that we don't get back what we deserve. Our job is just to sow the seeds to get the kids away from the streets and the gangs and the institutions into strong, supportive, safe families. But then God's explosive economy will go to work within the society's foundation to reap a harvest of adults ready to contribute and glorify God. And that is what World Orphans is doing every day. So let's stand with kids without families. Let's stand with World Orphans in prayer, and let's stand with them financially. This is a night to add zeros. Go big. I'm glad to be with you all tonight. I'm glad to stand together with you. Although the problem is massive, working together, kindling the light, and with God's explosive economy, I think we can make a significant difference. Thank you all.